Talon crouched on the edge of the cliff, wind whipping his thin jacket around his shoulders. Below him, the valley stretched like a black scar across the planet. Jagged rocks jutted from the ground, scorched by fire that had fallen from above, and the remnants of villages lay in twisted ruin. This was Azura, the Dragon Emperor's world, a land ruled by creatures humans could barely comprehend. Floating cities hovered in the sky, chained to the earth by glowing crystal cables. Dragons patrolled the skies, their eyes like molten suns, their scales gleaming with power too immense for humans to touch. Talon was 12, small and thin, with hair matted from days of scavenging. He had survived this long because he was clever and careful, but cleverness was never enough. Every day was a gamble. The Emperor's scouts flew overhead, massive dragons with silver wings that blotted out the sun. If they spotted a human wandering too far from shelter, they could swoop down and snatch him in a heartbeat. He scanned the valley. Smoke rose from a nearby ravine, another sign of destruction. Humans had tried to appease the Emperor before, leaving gifts, sacrifices, and offerings at the edges of dragon patrols. Gold, gems, even firestones from the floating mountains, all had been rejected. Entire villages had been wiped out for daring to hope. Talon had watched from the shadows, remembering the screams, the heat, and the smell of scorched wood. He had lost everything once. He would not lose himself again. Yet even in fear, curiosity burned inside him. The dragons fascinated him, not just terrified him. How could something so massive, so strong, live with such intelligence? Could humans ever reach them, not with offerings or weapons but with wit? Talon wondered if courage and thought might be more powerful than brute force. He had been mapping the sky paths in secret for weeks, observing patterns in the patrols, noting the times when dragons rested, and when their attention wandered. Using these observations he could slip past them unnoticed. Most adults dismissed this kind of thinking as pointless. Dragons were too powerful, humans too weak, but Talon did not accept limits set by fear. A shadow passed over him, sudden and vast. He froze. A scout, bigger than any dragon he had seen up close, circled low. Talon's heart hammered. He stayed motionless, pressed to the rock, barely breathing. The dragon's golden eyes swept over the cliff, scanning. Talon remembered every story the elders told. The Emperor did not just kill for hunger. He killed to enforce fear. Humans were playthings in his eyes, fragile, temporary, and foolish. The shadow moved on. Talon exhaled slowly. He knew he had been lucky this time. But luck was fragile. Only skill and courage could carry a human in this world. He glanced at the horizon where the floating cities hung in the sky, glittering with lights even as the day faded. The topmost city belonged to the Dragon Emperor himself, a fortress of scales and crystal where no human had ever dared set foot. Every offering, every prayer had failed to reach him. Every attempt had ended in destruction. Talon's eyes narrowed. He had an idea, small but daring. If he could get closer than any human had before, if he could find a way to reach the Emperor without the shields of gold or firestones, maybe, just maybe, he could do what no one else had, earn the dragon's attention. Not with wealth, not with fear, but with something no dragon had ever expected. Something human. He thought of the old ledgers he had scavenged from abandoned settlements. Paper was rare, fragile, but it carried the power to capture thought. He had begun to draw, copying dragons from memory, sketching their wings, the curve of their tails, the sharp glint in their eyes. At first, it had been a game, something to pass the long hours in hiding. But now it felt different. It felt like preparation. If he could create something that showed understanding, something personal, it might reach the Emperor in a way nothing else could. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the valley. Talon climbed down the cliff carefully, holding his few belongings close. He passed the blackened remains of a village, his stomach tightening at the memories of screams. He knew the Emperor's patrols could return at any moment. Every step was measured, deliberate. Every sound could mean discovery. As he reached the edge of the burned village, he froze again. A faint rumble shook the rocks beneath him. He looked up. The Dragon Emperor himself was descending from the clouds, vast and terrifying, his silver scales reflecting the dying light like molten metal. Talon's stomach nodded. He could run, hide, or risk everything by staying still. The human in him, the part that refused to be crushed by fear, clenched his fists. He had seen what the Emperor did to humans, and yet, he also saw a chance. A tiny chance, but a chance to prove something that no human had ever dared prove. Courage, thought, and heart. These were weapons no dragon could anticipate. Talon tightened his grip on his satchel. Whatever happened next, he would not run blindly. He would move carefully, observe, and act. The Emperor's shadow fell across the ground like night swallowing day. And for the first time, Talon felt something strange, a spark of hope. Because he knew that surviving this encounter might not just be about escaping. It might be about showing a dragon what humans could truly be. And as the Emperor's massive wings beat the air above him, Talon took a quiet, steadying breath. He was ready to make his move. Talon's heart pounded as the Dragon Emperor landed on the plateau ahead. The ground shook with each step of the massive beast. Smoke curled from the tips of his wings, and sparks of molten light ran across his scales like tiny rivers of fire. Villagers had gathered at a safe distance, frozen in terror. Their faces were pale, mouths open in silent screams. No one dared move. No one dared breathe too loudly. The Emperor's eyes swept the area, scanning, glowing like molten gold. Talon crouched behind a charred pillar, clutching his satchel to his chest. Every instinct screamed to run, but he knew running meant death. He had watched dragons strike from above, fast, precise, unstoppable. He had survived by watching patterns, studying their behavior, and understanding that patience could sometimes outweigh speed. The humans scrambled with offerings, their hands shaking as they thrust gold coins, glittering stones, and shards of rare crystal toward the dragon. The Emperor sniffed each one, eyes narrowing in disdain. With a flick of a claw, he sent them tumbling back, shattering against rocks. One woman screamed when the crystal she offered split in two. The Emperor's rumble shook the air like distant thunder, and every villager's stomach dropped. Talon stayed low, hiding in the shadows. But he was studying, remembering. Every movement the Emperor made, every pause, every glance, it was information. He noticed something adults never seemed to. The dragon lingered longer on small, simple gestures, especially from children. A tiny scrap of cloth, a hand-carved figure, or even a timid bow. He realized that dragons, even the Emperor, responded not just to material value, but to sincerity. That gave him an idea. It was risky, almost impossible, but it was the only plan that might work. He would not bring gold. He would not bring jewels. He had nothing except a few scraps of paper, a pencil, and his courage. He had been drawing in secret, copying dragons from memory, sketching their wings, their tails, the sharp glint in their eyes. He had even practiced folding the paper neatly, keeping it protected, small enough to reach the Emperor without seeming like a threat. Talon's palms sweated as he moved closer, step by careful step. The villagers gasped and whispered warnings, but he ignored them. Fear had no place in this moment, not blind fear anyway. He focused on observing, adjusting to every beat of the dragon's wings, every shift of weight. He moved in the shadows, using every stone and pillar as cover. The Emperor roared suddenly, a sound like cracking mountains. Talon froze. Sparks flew from his wings as he ducked behind a broken wall. The dragon's head swiveled, nostrils flaring. Talon could feel the heat even from this distance. If he were seen now, he would be crushed in an instant. He pressed flat against the ground, holding his breath, willing the world to disappear around him. Then he noticed it, a tiny pause in the Emperor's movement. The dragon's gaze lingered for a fraction of a second on a small, torn piece of cloth lying near the village ruins. A child's scrap, nothing of value. Talon's heart leapt. It was proof of what he had suspected. The Emperor's judgment was not only on wealth or fear, it was on attention, on acknowledgement, on understanding. Encouraged, Talon crept forward, closer than he had ever dared. He gripped the folded paper in his hands, feeling the texture, feeling the weight of possibility. One wrong move and he would be crushed. One misstep and he would vanish. But every calculation, every observation, every ounce of courage told him this was the moment to act. A shadow passed over him. The Emperor's wings shifted, blocking the sun and casting the world into sudden twilight. Talon froze again, heart hammering, but he did not run. He could not. To run now would be to give in to fear. And fear had never saved a human, not once, not ever. The Emperor lowered his massive head, nostrils flaring, eyes narrowing as if sensing Talon's very thoughts. Talon felt the immense intelligence behind those glowing eyes, weighty, ancient, unstoppable. But he also felt something else, curiosity. The dragon hesitated, uncertain, something the villagers had never seen before. Talon whispered to himself, barely audible, "This is it. No one has tried this. No one has dared." His hands shook, but his resolve hardened. He had nothing to offer except what humans had in abundance: heart, thought, and courage. That might be enough. It had to be enough. Step by step, he inched forward, folding the paper neatly, readying himself to hold it out. The Emperor's gaze followed him, every massive scale rippling with tension. Around them, the villagers could only watch, frozen between hope and terror. Talon came to a stop, just within reach of the Emperor's enormous claw. His legs trembled, but he straightened, drawing in a deep breath. He knew that the next few moments would decide everything: life, death, or perhaps something no human had ever dreamed possible. And in the silence before action he felt it, a spark of daring, a surge of defiance. The impossible was within reach. All he had to do was act. Talon's small hands trembled as he held the folded paper before him. The Dragon Emperor's eyes, massive and golden, followed every movement. Around him, the villagers held their breath. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if the planet itself waited to see what would happen next. Talon's heart hammered, but he forced himself to stand tall, shoulders squared. This was no longer about hiding or surviving. This was about daring to reach something that had never been reached before. He had studied the dragons, observed the Emperor's patterns, and memorized every twitch, every flick of the tail. He had learned that brute force meant nothing here. Only intelligence, courage, and understanding could get a human this close. And now, standing on the edge of what could easily be his last step, he realized the truth. The Emperor judged not strength alone, but thought, bravery, and honesty. Talon took another deep breath, letting the fear settle into a sharp focus. He had no gold, no jewels, no firestones. He had only a simple drawing, a careful sketch of the Emperor himself, wings outstretched, eyes blazing, every scale captured in humble lines. It was nothing compared to the true glory of the dragon, but it was human. It was honest, and that honesty was the only thing that might reach him. He stepped forward, ignoring the panicked gasps from the villagers. He could feel the heat radiating off the Emperor's scales, a living wall of power. One misstep, one careless movement, and the giant claw could crush him instantly. Yet he moved slowly, deliberately, each step measured. The paper never left his hands. He folded it again, making it small enough to slip under the tip of a claw but large enough to be seen. The Emperor shifted his massive head, nostrils flaring, and tilted one eye toward him. The dragon's gaze was like fire on Talon's skin, piercing deep into his thoughts. Most humans would have cowered, would have begged or thrown themselves to the ground. But Talon did none of that. He held the paper out, trembling, and spoke, not in fear, not in pleading, but in quiet truth. "I am just a human, but I see you. Thank you for existing." The words were simple. The villagers froze, some trembling with disbelief. And for a moment the air itself seemed to hold still. The Emperor's eyes narrowed, flicking from the tiny figure to the paper, back again. There was a long, heavy pause, the kind that could crush a human in seconds with sheer weight. But Talon did not flinch. Something unprecedented happened. The Emperor lowered his head closer to the paper, sniffing, observing. The rumble that rolled from his throat was different this time, not anger, not hunger, but curiosity. The scales along his neck shimmered, almost like a ripple of thought passing through solid metal. He extended one massive claw and Talon's stomach sank. Was this the end? Was he about to be crushed? Instead, the dragon tapped the drawing gently, so lightly that it almost seemed like an acknowledgement. Talon's eyes widened. The Emperor's focus did not waver, but he did not strike. Around them, the villagers exhaled in disbelief, watching a human interact with a being none had dared confront. Talon's mind raced. He realized that this moment, small, fragile, dangerous, was his chance to prove something larger. Humans were not just fragile creatures meant to cower or die. Humans could think, act, and touch the minds of giants in ways no one else imagined. Courage, intelligence, and honesty were weapons no dragon could anticipate. He stepped closer, slowly, keeping the paper in both hands. The Emperor tilted his massive head as if reading Talon's very intent. Each scale rippled under the light, each massive wing flexed, yet still he made no move of violence. Talon could feel his own heartbeat pounding like a drum in his chest, but he did not falter. The villagers whispered among themselves in awe and fear. Some began to step closer, emboldened by the courage of one human daring to face the impossible. But Talon did not notice them. His focus was absolute. Every step, every breath, every heartbeat was a calculation, a test of whether bravery could reach across an impossible divide. Suddenly the Emperor shifted, lowering his head even closer. The air smelled of ozone and molten metal. Talon could see the intricate ridges along the dragon's scales, the jagged teeth glinting in the fading light. He could feel the immense weight of the dragon's mind pressing, intelligent and ancient, trying to comprehend the smallest human in front of him. Talon whispered again, barely audible, "I do not fear you because I understand you." The words seemed to resonate. The Emperor's claw lifted slightly, brushing the ground, creating a small, harmless tremor. He was testing the human. Talon held his ground, unblinking, unshaking, even as the village seemed to vanish around them, leaving only dragon and human locked in a silent confrontation of courage and intellect. Then the unthinkable happened. The Emperor leaned closer, sniffing the paper once more. And Talon saw it in the dragon's eyes, a spark of recognition, of something like respect. He had done what no human had done before, reached the mind of the Dragon Emperor not with gifts or flattery, but with bravery and understanding. For the first time, Talon realized the truth of the world he lived in. Humans were small, yes, but not weak. Humans could act with intelligence, with courage, with honesty, and change even the course of beings that seemed invincible. And as the Emperor's massive eyes continued to study him, Talon felt a surge of hope. The impossible was no longer a wall. It was a challenge, a test he might actually pass. The Dragon Emperor shifted again, a sound like mountains grinding together, and Talon knew that the next moment would decide everything. Would the dragon strike, or would he allow this human's courage to leave a mark that no fire or gold ever could? Talon braced himself. Whatever came next, it would not just define his life. It could redefine what it meant to be human in a world ruled by dragons. Talon's legs trembled, but he did not step back. The Dragon Emperor's massive head hung mere meters above him, eyes blazing like twin suns. Every villager in the valley held their breath, frozen in awe and fear. Talon felt the heat radiating off the dragon's scales. One misstep could mean instant death, yet somehow he had survived this close for the first time. He gripped the folded paper tighter, his only weapon in a world dominated by fire, steel, and sheer size. The drawing was imperfect, lines wobbly, some scales too small, but it carried something no gold or jewel ever could: thought, care, and human courage. He took a deep breath and whispered, "I see you. I respect you. That is all I offer." The Emperor shifted slightly, wings brushing the ground, creating a gust strong enough to knock loose stones into the villager's legs. His tail thumped like thunder, yet he did not strike. Instead, his glowing eyes narrowed, scanning Talon with intelligence and scrutiny. The boy could feel it, every thought of the dragon probing, analyzing, weighing life and meaning. For the first time, the Dragon Emperor seemed uncertain. Talon moved one careful step closer, hand still raised with the drawing. He knew the villagers expected him to kneel, to plead, to sacrifice, but he did none of those things. Humans had spent generations cowering, submitting, trying to appease the dragons with fear and offerings. He would do something different. He would stand tall. He would offer honesty and courage. The Emperor's massive claw hovered over the paper, and Talon felt the power in the air. The scale of the beast was unimaginable. The strength to crush a human in an instant was beyond calculation. And yet, he felt something else, a hesitation, a pause that had never existed before. The dragon studied the boy not as prey but as a puzzle. Around them, whispers rippled through the villagers. "He's going to die. No human can survive this. What is he thinking?" But Talon ignored them. Every ounce of his being was focused on the moment, on the tiny chance that courage and intelligence could reach a mind that had ruled this planet for centuries. The boy raised the paper higher, letting the last rays of sunlight catch it, illuminating the careful lines of his drawing. "I am just a human," he said, voice steady despite the pounding of his heart, "but I can see greatness. I see you not as a monster but as something majestic. Thank you for existing." For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a low rumble started in the Dragon Emperor's chest. At first, it sounded like anger, like the growl of a volcano ready to erupt. But slowly it shifted. The rumble became softer, more like a deep vibration that ran along the ground. The dragon's massive head lowered closer to Talon, not in threat but in attention. Talon froze, feeling the immense power around him, yet also sensing a fragile opening. The dragon's glowing eyes flicked from the boy to the paper, then back. Talon realized that he had done something no human had ever done. Reached the Dragon Emperor without fear, without flattery, without bribes. Just courage, just thought, just honesty. The Emperor extended his massive claw and Talon's stomach clenched. He could feel the vibrations through the ground. One tap, one movement and it could end him. He held his breath, hands still outstretched. The dragon's claw hovered for a long moment. Then instead of striking, it gently tapped the paper. A simple, soft touch, but it was enough. It was acknowledgement. Talon's knees shook, but he did not fall. The dragon's eyes softened, ever so slightly as though reading not just the paper, but the courage behind it. Around them, the villagers gasped, some crying quietly, unable to believe what they were witnessing. One small human, standing alone, had earned the attention of the mightiest being on Azura. The Emperor leaned closer, and Talon could see the fine ridges along his scales, the heat of his nostrils, the intelligence swirling in those massive eyes. He understood, in a way no human had before, that dragons were not mere beasts. They were beings of thought, of reason, of judgment. And he, a human, had touched that judgment without pleading, without sacrifice, only with honesty. Talon's voice quivered, but he spoke again, a little louder this time. I am small, I am human, but I am not afraid. I see you for what you are. And I thank you. The Dragon Emperor's wings flexed slowly, a low hum vibrating through the air. For a moment, Talon feared it was a warning. But the rumble became steady, calm, almost like breathing. The dragon had made a choice. He would not strike. He would allow this human to stand. He would allow this human's courage to exist beside his power. Talon felt something swell inside him, a mix of relief, awe, and triumph. He had survived, yes, but more importantly he had achieved what humans had long believed impossible. He had reached a dragon with thought and honesty. Not with fear. Not with wealth. Not with sacrifice. With courage. Around them, the villagers began to whisper excitedly, some stepping closer, emboldened by what they had witnessed. A single human had done what no village, no army, no offering could do. He had proven that intelligence and bravery could change the course of a world ruled by giants. Talon lowered the paper slowly, keeping his hands visible. The Emperor leaned back, massive wings rustling, the gold of his eyes still watching the boy. Talon knew that this moment would not erase centuries of fear or hardship. But it had done something no one had dared dream. It had shown that humans could act, think, and even touch the minds of the impossible. And in that silent, tense, incredible moment, Talon realized the truth. Courage, intelligence, and honesty were weapons stronger than claws, fire, or gold. He had survived the impossible. He had changed the impossible. And the Dragon Emperor had noticed. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of scorched earth and molten scales. Talon knew this encounter was only the beginning. How the Emperor would respond next, how humans would rise from this moment, remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. The balance of fear had changed, and humans had proven that they could face the impossible, and live. Talon sank to his knees, finally letting his arms fall. The Dragon Emperor's gaze lingered on him, unblinking, massive, golden. For a moment, silence ruled the valley, broken only by the soft rustle of wings and the faint hum of molten metal from the dragon's scales. Around him, the villagers exhaled as though emerging from decades of fear. Some wept. Some laughed quietly. Some simply stared, mouths open, unable to process what had just happened. The Emperor remained still, colossal wings tucked partially as though deliberating. Talon had expected him to strike after the acknowledgement, to remind the humans of their fragility. But no. The dragon's posture was calm. The terrifying rumble that had always promised destruction had faded into a quiet presence, almost contemplative. Talon realized, with a mix of awe and disbelief, that the Emperor had not just tolerated him. He had recognized him. News traveled fast, faster than any human could run. Scouts from other villages, watching from the shadows, carried word of the boy who dared to approach the Dragon Emperor and lived. By nightfall, every enclave of humans knew his name, Talon. They whispered of his courage in the dark, trading stories of how one small human had faced the might of an ancient being and emerged alive. The fear that had gripped them for centuries was no longer absolute. For the first time, hope found a place in their hearts. Talon stayed kneeling a moment longer, folding the paper carefully and tucking it into his satchel. He glanced at the Emperor, who had lifted his head now, eyes scanning the horizon. The dragon turned slowly, wings flexing, before rising into the sky. He circled once, low enough for Talon to see the massive shadows stretch across the ground, then lifted higher, toward the floating cities, leaving behind a silence that was almost sacred. The villagers slowly approached, some hesitant, some emboldened. Elder women and men patted Talon's shoulders, their faces lined with tears and disbelief. Children stared wide-eyed, inspired. He felt a swell of pride, but it was tempered by the understanding of what had almost happened. Courage was not safe, it was risky, terrifying. And yet it was the only thing that could change their world. Talon walked back toward the remnants of his home village, now little more than charred stones and ash. He ran his fingers over the walls, remembering the screams, the heat, the helplessness he had felt as a younger child when the Emperor had destroyed homes for no reason. But now, for the first time, he saw a flicker of possibility. Humans could act. Humans could challenge the impossible, Not with weapons, not with offerings, but with thought, bravery, and heart. He found the small ledgers he had scavenged earlier, the pages filled with sketches of dragons and notes on their patterns. For the first time he no longer drew out of fear or practice. He drew out of hope. Every scale he sketched, every careful line of a wing became a map, not just of dragons but of possibility. He realized that knowledge, observation, and courage were just as powerful as fire or metal. Talon began to teach the children of the Enclave what he had learned. Watch carefully, think clearly, act bravely. Small humans could survive, yes, but they could also influence, understand, and even reach the minds of dragons. Every child he taught carried the spark of courage, a spark that could ignite hope across the land. Word reached other villages and slowly humans began to change. Some dared to leave offerings of a new kind, drawings, gestures, acts of thought and bravery. And sometimes they were allowed to pass unharmed. The Dragon Emperor, silent and ancient, remained unpredictable, but Talon had shown that humans could affect him, could reach him, could exist alongside his power. Months passed and Talon grew stronger, not just in body but in wisdom. He ventured further, mapping floating cities, noting patrol patterns, teaching others to move wisely, carefully, and bravely. Fear remained, as it must in a world ruled by dragons, but it no longer controlled them. Humans had found their edge, courage tempered with intelligence. One evening, as Talon watched the sun sink below the jagged horizon, the Emperor appeared again, circling high above. Talon did not bow, did not kneel. He raised his hand, a silent greeting, and the dragon paused, gliding in the wind for a heartbeat longer than before. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was acknowledgement. Talon smiled, understanding that the impossible had changed. In the quiet that followed, Talon realized what he had truly done. A human, small and seemingly insignificant, had acted where armies and gifts had failed. A single act of courage, intelligence, and honesty had shifted the balance of fear. The Dragon Emperor might still be a force of unimaginable power, but humans were no longer helpless. They were capable, daring, and, most importantly, alive in ways dragons had not anticipated. Talon folded the original drawing once more and placed it in his satchel. It was no longer just a piece of paper. It was a symbol of possibility, proof that the human spirit could touch even the mightiest minds. And in that symbol, in the courage it represented, lay the hope of generations yet to come. Humans had survived. Humans had changed the rules. And the story of one small orphan who dared to thank a dragon would be told for generations. A reminder that intelligence, courage, and heart could bend even the impossible to human will. Talon looked up at the sky, where the Dragon Emperor vanished into the clouds. He whispered to himself, not in fear but in triumph, "We are humans. We are brave. We are not powerless. And we will endure." And somewhere far above, the Emperor's eyes, golden and ancient, had noticed.